You do not use an unwritten language in modern warfare. This wasn't opinion. This was doctrine. For centuries, military codes had followed a single ironclad principle: complexity through mathematics, security through encryption layers, protection through constant cipher rotation. From Caesar's simple shift to the German Enigma machine, every code in history shared one fundamental characteristic: they could be written down, analyzed, and therefore, eventually broken. The Japanese knew this. Their cryptanalysis teams had proven it throughout the Pacific War. They'd cracked American naval codes before Midway. They'd intercepted and decoded thousands of Allied transmissions. Their codebreakers worked in underground bunkers in Tokyo, methodical and relentless, armed with the certainty that every code, given enough time and enough intercepted messages, would reveal its pattern. Because patterns were inevitable. Human brains created codes. Human brains could break them. This was the rule that governed every intelligence operation in World War II. The race wasn't about creating unbreakable codes. That was understood to be impossible. The race was about staying one step ahead, rotating your ciphers faster than the enemy could crack them. But in 1942, one man with a radical idea changed everything. And the moment the Japanese realized what they were facing would fundamentally alter their understanding of what was possible in warfare. Philip Johnston stands before a skeptical Marine Corps officer in San Diego, making a pitch that sounds absolutely insane. He's 50 years old, too old for combat, a veteran of the First World War who now works as a civil engineer. But Johnston possesses knowledge that makes him uniquely dangerous to America's enemies. He spent his childhood on the Navajo reservation in Arizona, the son of Protestant missionaries. While other white children learned nursery rhymes, Philip Johnston learned Dine Bizad, the Navajo language. And he knows something the Marine Corps doesn't. He knows that Navajo isn't just difficult. It's linguistically isolated. Unlike Spanish or German or Japanese, which belong to language families with shared roots and grammatical structures, Navajo stands alone. It's a tonal language where pitch changes meaning. Its verb structures are so complex that a single word can express what English requires an entire sentence to convey. Its syntax operates on principles fundamentally alien to Indo-European or Asian languages. More importantly, Johnston knows this. In 1942, fewer than 30 non-Navajo people in the entire world can speak the language fluently. None of them are Japanese. There's no Navajo dictionary, no grammar books, no Rosetta Stone. The language exists only in the mouths and minds of approximately 50,000 Navajo people, almost all of them living in the American Southwest. Think about what that means. You're not talking about a code that needs to be rotated or updated. You're talking about a living language that cannot be learned from books, cannot be studied in universities, cannot be analyzed through traditional cryptanalysis because there's no written foundation to analyze. But here's where Johnston's idea becomes brilliant. He's not proposing to simply speak Navajo over the radio. That would be too slow for battlefield communications, and it wouldn't cover modern military terminology. Navajo has no words for tank or dive bomber or amphibious assault. Johnston proposes a two-layer system. First, recruit Navajo Marines and train them as radio operators. Second, have them develop a military vocabulary using Navajo words as metaphors. A tank becomes a turtle, a bomber becomes a buzzard, a submarine becomes an iron fish. Then, on top of this, create an alphabet code where Navajo words represent English letters, allowing them to spell out any term that doesn't have a metaphor. The result is a code within a language that cannot be learned. The Marine officer listening to Johnston's pitch understands something crucial about the Pacific Theater in 1942. The Japanese are winning. They've captured the Philippines, overwhelmed Singapore, pushed deep into China, and established a defensive perimeter across thousands of miles of ocean. Their intelligence apparatus is sophisticated and ruthless. They intercept American communications constantly, and their codebreakers work with terrifying efficiency. American boys are dying because Japanese commanders know where the next attack will come from. The officer approves Johnston's proposal. Within weeks, the Marine Corps begins recruiting Navajo men. They call them Code Talkers, and they will become the most successful cryptographic system in military history. By June 1942, the first 29 Navajo recruits arrive at Camp Elliott in California. They're young, most between 18 and 25. Many have never left the reservation before. They undergo standard Marine training, then something unprecedented. They're locked in a room and told to create a military code. In 4 weeks, they construct a vocabulary of over 200 military terms and an alphabet where multiple Navajo words can represent a single English letter, preventing pattern recognition. A can be Wulachiant, Balasana, apple, or Senile axe. B can be Shush, bear, Tuishja, barrel, or Nahashchid, badger. The code is tested. A message that takes conventional encryption machines 30 minutes to encode and decode. The Navajo Code Talkers transmit and translate in 20 seconds. 20 seconds. They're deployed to Guadalcanal, then Tarawa, then Polilliu, and everywhere they go, something remarkable happens. American attacks succeed. Japanese positions fall with shocking speed because Japanese commanders receive no warning. Intercepted radio transmissions become meaningless strings of sounds that match no known language pattern. And in Tokyo, in the underground cryptanalysis centers where Japan's best codebreakers work in shifts around the clock, they begin to realize they're facing something they've never encountered before. September 1944. A Japanese intelligence officer named Goro Hada sits in a concrete bunker beneath Tokyo, headphones pressed against his ears, listening to a recording for the 47th time. The transmission was intercepted 3 days ago off Polilliu. Standard American radio frequency. Standard Marine Corps protocols. But the content is incomprehensible. Days clash mostly shush. Hada is one of Japan's most accomplished cryptanalysts. He speaks English fluently. He's cracked American codes before. He understands how encryption works. You identify the pattern, you map the frequency distribution, you look for repeated phrases, you exploit mathematical weaknesses. But this isn't encryption. This is something else. The sounds follow no pattern he recognizes. The phonemes don't match English, don't match Spanish, don't match any Philippine language. Some syllables are guttural, produced deep in the throat. Others are nasal, with tonal variations that change the sound's meaning in ways a Japanese-trained ear can barely distinguish. He plays the recording again and again. 2 desks over, another analyst named Takeo Shimura is manually transcribing intercepted transmissions, trying to build a phonetic database. He's been doing this for 6 months. His notebooks contain thousands of transcribed words, carefully organized, compared, analyzed. He's found nothing. No repeated phrases. No obvious patterns. No mathematical structure. It's not a code, Shimura says, not for the first time. It's a language. We know it's a language, Hada replies. But which one? This is the question consuming Japanese intelligence in the fall of 1944. Because by now, the pattern is undeniable. Every American offensive that uses these mysterious transmissions succeeds. Every island assault where these strange voices coordinate the attack overwhelms Japanese defenses with terrifying precision. The Americans are sending orders in real time, adjusting artillery fire, calling in airstrikes, coordinating beach landings, all in this unknown tongue that Japanese radio operators intercept perfectly and understand not at all. Think about the strategic nightmare this creates. Japanese commanders can hear American plans. They just can't comprehend them. Imperial General Headquarters issues a directive. Identify this language at any cost. Japanese linguists analyze hundreds of intercepted recordings. They compare the phonemes to every known language database. They bring in experts on Native American languages. Japan's intelligence services have files on dozens of tribal languages from before the war, gathered by anthropologists and academics. Nothing matches. The sounds are too complex. The tonal variations too subtle. The grammatical structure, when they can even identify grammatical structures, follows rules that don't correspond to any documented language family. One analyst proposes it might be a constructed language, invented specifically for military use. But that doesn't explain the fluency. The American radio operators using this language speak it at conversational speed with the casual rhythm of native speakers. You cannot train soldiers to speak a constructed language with that kind of fluency in the middle of a war. June 1944. Saipan. The Japanese have captured an American Marine, not a code talker. The Navajo Marines operate under strict orders never to allow themselves to be taken alive, and they're assigned bodyguards specifically to prevent capture. But this prisoner is a conventional radio operator who's worked alongside the code talkers. Japanese interrogators question him for 3 days. They use every technique in their arsenal, some brutal, some psychological, all designed to extract information. What language are your special radio operators speaking? The Marine tells them the truth. I don't know. Where do they learn it? I don't know. They just speak it. What tribe are they from? The Marine doesn't know. He's never asked. In a segregated military culture of 1940s America, white Marines often don't interact socially with Native American Marines. He knows they're Indians. He doesn't know which nation. The interrogators don't believe him. They think he's resisting. But he's not. He genuinely doesn't know. The Japanese try a different approach. They bring in every prisoner of war they've captured who's ever heard the code talkers operate. They play recordings and ask, "What is this?" The universal answer is a shrug. Some Indian language, I guess. But which one? Apache? Comanche? Cheyenne? Japanese intelligence obtains linguistic samples of 47 different Native American languages. They have research files from anthropological studies conducted in the 1920s and 30s. They compare phonetic patterns. Nothing matches, or rather, dozens of languages match small fragments, but none match consistently. Because what they're hearing isn't just Navajo. It's Navajo spoken in a military code structure that even a Navajo civilian couldn't understand without training. The code talkers don't just translate. They use metaphors, alphabet spellings, and deliberately varied vocabulary to prevent any pattern recognition. October 1944. The Philippines. Japanese radio intercept stations are now operating under a new protocol. Every transmission in the mystery language is recorded, transcribed phonetically by 3 separate analysts to catch tonal variations, and forwarded to Tokyo for analysis. The Cryptanalysis Center has grown. 30 linguists now work full-time on what they're calling the American tribal code problem. They made progress. Sort of. They've determined that the language has a subject-object-verb-word order, similar to Japanese, but different from English. They've identified what appear to be verb conjugations with multiple aspect markers. They've noticed that some sounds are consistently associated with certain contexts: military commands, direction indicators, time references. But understanding grammatical structure isn't the same as understanding meaning. Goro Hada sits in his bunker office, surrounded by filing cabinets full of transcriptions, and performs a calculation that makes his stomach sink. The Japanese have intercepted approximately 3,000 transmissions in this language. They've transcribed every word. They've analyzed every pattern. They've thrown their nation's best linguistic minds at the problem for 2.5 years. And they can't translate a single sentence. Not one. They can identify when the Americans are coordinating an attack. The transmission volume increases, the tone becomes urgent. They can sometimes guess tactical information from context. If the mystery transmissions intensify near a certain island, an attack is probably coming there. But they cannot know what the Americans are saying, cannot know which beach, cannot know what time, cannot know the size of the force. Here's what makes it worse. The Japanese know the Americans know they're listening. This isn't a secret code the enemy believes is secure. This is a code the Americans use openly, confidently, because they understand it cannot be broken. Think about the psychological impact. Every Japanese commander in the Pacific knows that American Marines are coordinating attacks in a language their intelligence services cannot crack. It creates an aura of technological and intellectual superiority that's almost supernatural. November 1944. A Japanese officer named Shinizo Wachi, who studied at Stanford before the war and speaks perfect English, makes a proposal to Imperial General Headquarters. He suggests they capture a code talker alive. Not kill him, capture him. Bring him to Tokyo. Force him to teach the language. It's a reasonable idea, except for 3 problems. First, the code talkers are Marines. They're combat troops who fight and die alongside their units. They're not soft, rear-echelon targets. Second, they operate in pairs with strict security protocols. They're often assigned bodyguards, usually Navajo Marines themselves, with orders to prevent capture at any cost. The implication is clear. Third, even if the Japanese somehow captured a code talker alive, would he teach them? These men volunteer for the Marines, knowing their language would become a weapon. Many come from families and communities who've suffered under American government policies for generations. Their choice to serve is complicated and profound, but their commitment to the mission is absolute. Still, Wachi's proposal circulates through Japanese military intelligence. The order goes out. If you capture an American who seems to be using the tribal language, do not kill him. Take him alive. Transport him to Tokyo immediately. The order is never successfully executed. Here's why. By late 1944, the code talkers are integrated into every Marine division in the Pacific. They're at Iwo Jima. They're at Okinawa. They're in every major assault. And they operate with the full protection of the United States Marine Corps, which has finally recognized that these men, often discriminated against in civilian life, denied basic rights in their home states, possess a weapon more valuable than any artillery piece. The Japanese try one final approach. They recruit Joe Kimiya, a Navajo soldier captured in the Philippines in 1942 before the code talker program became widespread. Kimiya is not a code talker. He's an infantry soldier who happens to be Navajo. Japanese interrogators bring Kimiya to listen to intercepted code talker transmissions. They ask him to translate. He can't. This is the moment, the precise instant, when Japanese intelligence understands the full scope of what they're facing. Kimiya speaks Navajo. He grew up on a reservation. It's his first language. But when he listens to the code talker transmissions, he hears Navajo words used in combinations that make no literal sense. Turtle, in a military context. Buzzard, referring to something that's clearly not a bird. Strings of seemingly random words that must be spelling something using an alphabet code he doesn't know. Even a native Navajo speaker cannot understand the Navajo code without specific training. The Japanese have been defeated by linguistic innovation so thorough that even someone who speaks the base language cannot crack it without the key. Think about how demoralizing this is. Japanese intelligence has captured a Navajo soldier. They have him alive, cooperative to some degree under duress. And he cannot help them, because the code isn't just Navajo. It's Navajo transformed into a military cryptographic system by Marines who created a new vocabulary, a new structure, a new way of using their ancestral language that's simultaneously ancient and utterly modern. February 1945. Iwo Jima. 6 code talkers land with the first assault wave. They operate from foxholes under fire, transmitting attack coordinates, calling in artillery support, directing tank movements. During the first 48 hours of the battle, they send and receive over 800 messages. Not a single message is decoded by Japanese intelligence. Japanese radio operators on Iwo Jima intercept every transmission. They record them. They forward them to Tokyo. And they prepare for American attacks they can hear coming but cannot specify. The result is tactical chaos. Japanese commanders know something is happening, but where? Which sector? What force size? American Marines advance with a coordination precision that seems impossible in the volcanic ash and deadly terrain of Iwo Jima. Artillery fire adjusts in real time. Reinforcements arrive exactly where they're needed. Air support hits targets within minutes of being called. Major Howard Connor, the signal officer at Iwo Jima, will later say, "Were it not for the Navajos, the Marines would never have taken Iwo Jima." That's not hyperbole. That's mathematical reality. The code talkers provided secure, instant communication that allowed American forces to coordinate complex operations under fire without giving Japanese defenders any warning. If you're watching from today, knowing how the war ends, this might not seem remarkable. But place yourself in 1945. Place yourself in that Japanese intelligence bunker in Tokyo. You're listening to the language that's helping destroy your nation's defensive perimeter, island by island, and you cannot understand a single word. Your cryptanalysts, brilliant men who've cracked codes before, sit in rooms full of transcriptions and recordings, and they've concluded the impossible. This code cannot be broken. Cannot be broken quickly. Cannot be broken with current resources. Cannot be broken, period. Because it's not a code in the traditional sense. It's a weaponized language with no written foundation, spoken by men whose culture preserved their tongue orally for 1,000 years, now transformed into a military tool that exists nowhere in Japanese intelligence databases. If this kind of forgotten history, stories of genius that changed warfare, fascinates you as much as it fascinates us, we'd be honored if you'd hit that subscribe button. We believe these stories of innovation and courage deserve to be told. And by subscribing, you help us ensure they aren't forgotten. August 1945, Japan surrenders. When American forces occupy Tokyo, they seize Japanese military intelligence archives. What they find in the cryptanalysis centers confirms what the code talkers already knew. The Japanese never broke the code. Not once in 3 years. The files show the Japanese tried everything. Linguistic analysis, pattern recognition, prisoner interrogation, captured equipment analysis. They threw resources at the problem that might have been better used elsewhere. And they got nowhere. Many worked ordinary jobs. They didn't talk about the war. When they did, they couldn't explain what made their service special because the code was still classified. In 1968, the code was finally declassified. The story began to emerge. In 2001, the original 29 code talkers who developed the code were awarded the Congressional Gold Medal. President George W. Bush presented the medals, calling them a circle of honor that cannot be broken. By then, most of the original 29 were gone. Only 4 attended the ceremony. Chester Nez, one of the original code talkers, lived until 2014. He was 93. In his later years, he traveled to schools, telling young people about the code. He spoke about growing up on the reservation, about being punished for speaking Navajo in boarding school, about joining the Marines and suddenly finding that the language he'd been told to forget was now his nation's most valuable weapon. He described what it felt like to speak Navajo over the radio, knowing Japanese soldiers were listening but couldn't understand. We were proud, he said. For the first time, being Navajo was something the military wanted. Think about that reversal. A language targeted for elimination became a military asset. An identity treated as inferior became strategically essential. The code talkers numbered approximately 400 by war's end. They served in every major Marine engagement in the Pacific: Iwo Jima, Okinawa, Guadalcanal, Tarawa, Peleliu, Saipan, Guam. Some died in combat. Some came home with wounds that never fully healed. All of them carried the knowledge that their language, the language of their grandparents and their ancestors, had been transformed into a weapon that helped defeat an empire. Today, the Navajo Code remains the only spoken military code never broken by an enemy in modern warfare. It stands as a testament to both the ingenuity of the men who created it and the resilience of a culture that preserved its language despite systematic efforts to erase it. When tourists visit the Navajo Nation today, they sometimes ask about the code talkers. Older Navajos remember them. Neighbors, relatives, men who served and came home and didn't talk about it for decades. The language itself is now taught in schools on the reservation. Young Navajo children learn the same words their great-grandfathers used to coordinate artillery strikes and call in air support. The language survives. And somewhere in an archive in Tokyo, there are still filing cabinets full of transcribed recordings. Thousands of transmissions carefully documented by Japanese cryptanalysts who never solved the puzzle. Those files represent one of the most complete records of failure in military intelligence history. But they also represent something else: proof that 400 Navajo Marines accomplished what entire cryptographic programs could not. They created security through culture, protection through language, victory through identity. If this story moved you, please hit that like button. Every click tells the algorithm this piece of history is worth remembering. We're dedicated to rescuing these forgotten stories from the archives. Stories of ordinary people who changed history through extraordinary courage and ingenuity. If you want to join us on this mission, please subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss these accounts of American resilience. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment with your city or state and tell us if someone in your family served. We read every comment, and we're honored to build this community of people who believe history matters. Thank you for ensuring that Philip Johnston, Chester Nez, and the 400 Navajo Marines who spoke in a code that could not be broken do not disappear into silence. They took a language that was nearly destroyed and turned it into an instrument of victory. They deserve to be remembered, and because you watch today, they will be. Many worked ordinary jobs. They didn't talk about the war. When they did, they couldn't explain what made their service special because the code was still classified. In 1968, the code was finally declassified. The story began to emerge. In 2001, the original 29 code talkers who developed the code were awarded the Congressional Gold Medal. President George W. Bush presented the medals, calling them a circle of honor that cannot be broken. By then, most of the original 29 were gone. Only 4 attended the ceremony. Chester Nez, one of the original code talkers, lived until 2014. He was 93. In his later years, he traveled to schools, telling young people about the code. He spoke about growing up on the reservation, about being punished for speaking Navajo in boarding school, about joining the Marines, and suddenly finding that the language he'd been told to forget was now his nation's most valuable weapon. He described what it felt like to speak Navajo over the radio, knowing Japanese soldiers were listening but couldn't understand. "We were proud," he said. "For the first time, being Navajo was something the military wanted." Think about that reversal. A language targeted for elimination became a military asset. An identity treated as inferior became strategically essential. The code talkers numbered approximately 400 by war's end. They served in every major Marine engagement in the Pacific: Iwo Jima, Okinawa, Guadalcanal, Tarawa, Peleliu, Saipan, Guam. Some died in combat. Some came home with wounds that never fully healed. All of them carried the knowledge that their language, the language of their grandparents and their ancestors, had been transformed into a weapon that helped defeat an empire. Today, the Navajo Code remains the only spoken military code never broken by an enemy in modern warfare. It stands as a testament to both the ingenuity of the men who created it and the resilience of a culture that preserved its language despite systematic efforts to erase it. When tourists visit the Navajo Nation today, they sometimes ask about the code talkers. Older Navajos remember them: neighbors, relatives, men who served and came home and didn't talk about it for decades. The language itself is now taught in schools on the reservation. Young Navajo children learn the same words their great-grandfathers used to coordinate artillery strikes and call in air support. The language survives. And somewhere in an archive in Tokyo, there are still filing cabinets full of transcribed recordings. Thousands of transmissions carefully documented by Japanese cryptanalysts who never solved the puzzle. Those files represent one of the most complete records of failure in military intelligence history. But they also represent something else: proof that 400 Navajo Marines accomplished what entire cryptographic programs could not. They created security through culture, protection through language, victory through identity. If this story moved you, please hit that like button. Every click tells the algorithm this piece of history is worth remembering. We're dedicated to rescuing these forgotten stories from the archives. Stories of ordinary people who changed history through extraordinary courage and ingenuity. If you want to join us on this mission, please subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss these accounts of American resilience. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment with your city or state and tell us if someone in your family served. We read every comment, and we're honored to build this community of people who believe history matters. Thank you for ensuring that Philip Johnston, Chester Nez, and the 400 Navajo Marines who spoke in a code that could not be broken do not disappear into silence. They took a language that was nearly destroyed and turned it into an instrument of victory. They deserve to be remembered. And because you watched today, they will be.